Hi ladies, my name is Megan Meyer and I am going to be sharing my testimony with you this morning, and then I will be back with you again in a couple of weeks to parallel my story with the story of Hagar in the Bible. And so pointing out some truths there, some deeper dives that God has revealed to me as I've walked with him through some kind of interesting and crazy and messy seasons. And I'm excited to share my story with you. I'm going to try to get through it. I think I've tried to record this now 7 times. So I'm just going to go with it, and I'm going to mess up and things are going to be weird, but that's 2020, right? I mean, that's how we're doing it. So we're just going to forge through together. And I want you to know ahead of time, as I go through this story with you, I know that there are parts in this that are sensitive subjects, and there are some really hard places that I've been through. And I just want you to know that in the deepest part of my soul, I believe that when we have the courage to bring the hardest parts of our life to the light, God meets us there with this abundance of grace, and love always wins. And so I'm just going to jump in. This has not been easy for me, this whole walk, because I am an avoider. I am a runner. And especially when I got into my Christian walk, when I fully stepped into letting Jesus be the Lord of my life, things did not get easier. Like, this story didn't get easier. It actually got harder, because I had this belief system that there were things in church and with church people that you don't talk about. And I really wanted to live this life that I felt was worthy, but I had this past that told me I was not. And there was this tension there. And church didn't feel like a safe place where I could bring my stuff. And so I continued to run and I continued to hide. But it wasn't the church that necessarily made me believe that I had to run and hide. It was kind of my life. So early on in my childhood, I had experiences that really solidified this running and denial and hiding, and a lot of shame in my life. When I was 5 years old, I was at a park with my brother just right across the street from my house, and a complete stranger came up to us and he sexually molested me right there in the park. And in this incredibly traumatic experience, I remember my brother yelling to me to run. And in the most concrete and primal way, this idea of, you got your fight or your flight. Well, the flight was instilled in me. And so I ran. There wasn't time to think. There wasn't time to have an emotional reaction. You just run. And so that's what I did. And I believe it kind of started this domino effect in my life, that when things get hard, you avoid them. You run from them. You don't think, you don't feel, you just run. And having that experience so young in my life opened up my brain and opened up my body to things that at that age, I don't believe anyone should be exposed to. And so I started seeking out, someone to keep me safe, someone to protect me. And then as I walked into being 11, 12, those years, this desire for sexual gratification, as crazy as it is for me, now a parent of a 15-year-old, you think, 15's different, but when he was 11 and 12, to think that those things, those feelings would have been forming in him the way they were in me, absolutely just blows my mind. And so I started seeking out, and I don't believe that it was like this deep longing for like sex, because I didn't even know what it was. but it was this hole in me that was desiring something. And I think there were chemical imbalances that came into place. And so I got into these destructive habits. It started with a little drinking. It was like curiosity, but there was this pull. It wasn't just like a normal kid doing normal things, but there was something in me that was lacking or looking. And so I always wanted something more. And I didn't have a relationship. We went to church. I remember we went to a Methodist church in Omaha, and but there wasn't an introduction to Jesus as I know him today. And that could have just been the time. It could have been the denomination. We were going to church, but there wasn't any kind of relationship established there. So there I was, a young kid, looking for something to fix me. Because I think at that point, I already believed that there was something wrong. So I started drinking. And at first it wasn't a lot. It was like a couple beers here and there, friends being cool. We'd smoke cigarettes, we were so just the coolest. But that wasn't enough for me. I needed that next thing. And so then we started smoking pot. And again, like it wasn't a lot. It wasn't this overwhelming thing. But in me, there was something that just kept looking. I was looking for the darkness to be calmed. I was looking for that space to be filled. And what my attention got averted to was boys. Because I didn't really necessarily like girls. Like the girls that were friends in my life at the time, like I wasn't really in the in crowd. I was kind of on the outside of the in crowd. And so I was more or less, I was kind of like the one they would kind of tease, the one that I was in, but really just to kind of be a little scapegoat when they needed a little fun and they needed someone to pick on. So I didn't feel included. I didn't feel like I belonged with girls. But when I was around boys, well, I was athletic, and so they let me come play sports. They let me compete, but then they'd also kind of look at me. And I kind of like that. I kind of wanted to belong somewhere. I think we all want to belong somewhere. And so when I realized that you can get attention from boys, and it was positive attention for the most part, then my focus shifted. And so I started seeking boyfriends and relationships. And I was 13 when I met a boy who was 18. I met him at a haunted house. And I didn't have any intentions. I didn't know what I was doing. All I knew was this older boy had an interest in me and wanted to take me out. And I just thought that meant I was super cool. And there must be something good about me if this boy wanted to be with me. And so I snuck out a couple of times, and we ended up having sex when I was 13 years old. There was nothing special about the night. There was nothing special about the place. It was an ordinary day on a not so extraordinary night, and this thing happened. And that was it. And I remember walking away from that thinking like, well, that's not such a big deal. And I kind of noticed it set me apart from the other girls. So I thought, well, this must be just what you do. And if you get attention from that and guys want to be around you, then maybe this is the formula. But I never felt fulfilled in here. So I kept searching and I kept drinking because even though you may not realize it, like in your, consciousness that you're a mess, your body kind of knows. And at that age, I could not handle it. So I just did what I knew I had to do to survive. You don't cry, you don't feel, you don't think, you just run. And when you can't physically run away, then you do whatever else you need to do, which would be drinking anytime I got the chance. There were times I was babysitting and I would take shots of vodka and then fill the bottle up with water so they wouldn't be able to tell. Sneaking stuff from my parents, having people bring stuff to my house and in the middle of the night, leaving in the middle of the night. So yeah, it was just this spiral. And it continued with the sex, trying to just find somebody that wanted me. And they were sure interested on the front end, but then afterward, I didn't really hear much from them. And so it was like that. And as that went on, my parents noticed that I started becoming depressed. I started wearing all black clothes and black eyeliner, black lipstick, because I found a group of people that they took that darkness and that was just their identity. And I thought, well, geez, I have all that darkness on the inside of me, so these must be my people, because they understand all that turmoil and all that sadness that I was feeling and all that loneliness. So then I just got involved with that group of people. So I was into the Gothic scene, listening to just, really sad music. And the sadness just got worse and worse. And I would cry because I just felt so, like my body hurt, because I just felt so sad and I didn't know how to fix it. And my parents didn't know how to fix it. So I went to a psychiatrist and they put me on Prozac. Well, back then, nobody knew that Prozac actually makes you, or can make teenagers more depressed. So being on a regimented schedule of that, and then continuing the lifestyle actually led me to try to take my life when I was 14 years old. I took a bottle of Tylenol PM and I called a friend and told him what I had done, and I said goodbye. And I went to my room and I just thought, okay, that's it. Like, I solved the problem. And what I didn't hear was the phone ring of that friend calling back to tell my parents what had happened. And I do remember them rushing me to the hospital, my mom trying to keep me awake on the way there. And going into the emergency room. And I remember them cutting my shirt off of me and my mom seeing all the cut marks all over my arms that I had been doing for months. And I don't think I'll ever forget the way she cried. And then I heard the heart monitor flatline, and that's the last thing I remember. And then I woke up. It must have been a couple days later. I'm not sure exactly how long. Maybe it was the next day. And I remember feeling for the first time in a really long time, I'm alive. And I wanted to be alive. And I remember specifically looking out the window and I saw the sun shining and I was like, oh, it's sunny out. Such a weird thing to remember. But I just felt like I had hope. So when I left the hospital, I had to go into a rehabilitation place, into Richard Young. It's not around anymore. But I also remember totally BSing my way through that place. I just wanted to get out. I didn't really feel like I needed counseling. Everything was fine. I was so much better. I knew I wasn't going to do that again. It was weird because it was like part of this cloud had lifted. And I'm like, I'm good. Let's just move on. So I got out of there. And, you kind of hear that whole thing about, okay, in order to change someone's life, you need a near-death experience or, the revelation of God. Well, I had the near-death experience. And so I'm thinking, perfect, new lease on life. Things are going to be different. And then I found out I was pregnant at 14. I don't remember much about conversations or how I was feeling or thinking. Again, I honestly think I just checked out because it was too much. And so my parents made the decision that because of how I had tried to kill myself and the amount of drugs I had put in my body and whatever they had to do to keep me alive, that they were terrified that the baby was going to be deformed or not make it. I don't have, crazy enough, there are some conversations that I still have not had with my parents. They don't talk about it, and it's a really hard thing to bring up. So there's a little sidebar there of things that still God is still working on. So at 14, I had an abortion, and there was no counseling afterward. There was a conversation that was, you better not do this again. And I just thought, well, I just won't get caught next time. And that hole on the inside of me just got bigger. And so what did I do before? You don't cry. You don't think. You don't feel. You just run and repeat. So this time, with all the things in my past, it just gets harder and harder to run from. So you have to work harder and harder to forget. So now I was doing all kinds of drugs. I would drop acid in the middle of my high school day, like at school, or I would just do it at home. I would go out and just I would be with the wrong people, much older boys, drinking, sneaking out. There was ecstasy, there was cocaine. Everything. I could not handle the situations I was putting myself in. I could not handle what I was putting my body through. And on the moments when I was sober enough to think about it, all I could think about was not being sober enough to remember. There were hotel rooms. There were houses. There were back seats of cars. And it's almost like I was doing all this stuff, like watching somebody else's life, like almost watching a movie. And it's like this horrible nightmare that you want to get out of, but you almost feel powerless. Like I almost felt like I had no control, like I'm watching it through the lens of somebody else's eyes, and I could not get out. Like it's this horrible nightmare that you cannot wake up from. And I didn't know how to do anything different. So you just keep doing the things that help you survive till the next day. And then when the next day comes, you just do it again. And somewhere along the line, that whole protection thing comes into play. And I met guys that would hang around, but they were they were not good guys. I was in several abusive relationships, and which just kind of solidified the type of person that I was. I was the kind of person that didn't have the value to be with somebody that, you know, was a good person. So I'd be with these guys. And I think I was almost like trying to, like, I find guys that I knew people didn't want, and I would want to save them. Like, I would want to pull out the good in them. Like, I thought I could change them. But unfortunately, you don't. And then you get manipulated, and then you get threatened, and then you get hurt. And it was a vicious cycle. But at one point in time, I was with this guy that I had known several years. Like, we were off and on. And I ended up getting pregnant again. And I was kind of optimistic. I didn't want to believe that I would be a throwaway person to this guy too, because we'd known each other for years and we had been friends and confided in each other. Like, we weren't just, you know, that one night stand buddy. Like, we actually had relationship. And so it felt like that final nail in the coffin, that when I got pregnant and I called him up and I told him what had happened, and there's that long pause. And I'm just kind of like, okay, message received. And he said, well, I'm not sure what I want you to, what you want me to do, but I can take you to the abortion clinic if you want. You don't cry. You don't feel. You don't think. You just keep running. So I said, no thanks. I'll do it myself. And so I went again. I was 21. And as I was sitting there, I did not want to be there. And I'm sitting there looking around the room, and I'm watching people act like this is just another day, just another Thursday, you know, like they're at the dentist office, or, you know, just going to get a checkup or something. And I just could not stop crying. I did not want this. I did not want this for my life. I didn't want to have to make these choices. And I just felt like I was just out on my own, like on this island. And everything was just so dark. And so in that room that day, I'm like, I can't do this. And I got up and I told the receptionist, and I was crying, and she was super sweet. And they helped me just fill out some paperwork, and I left. And I walked out into the daylight that day, and there was nobody there. There was nobody there. And I drove around, and I had nowhere to go. And I looked at my phone, and I had nobody to call. And after spending a few days with it, I just thought, this is it. I can't go through with this. This baby didn't deserve to just be with me, who nobody wanted. I can't deal with this. I can't do it. So I went back. And they take you back to this room, and it's like, it's awful. I think at that point, I thought the worst of the worst was when that guy said that he didn't want me, but really it's going into that room and they don't put you out. So they just give you like nitrous oxide. I think it's nitrous oxide, whatever they give you at the dentist to just kind of make you a little loopy. And I tried to breathe that in so deeply because I couldn't run physically. After I left that place, I didn't feel anything. I just thought, okay, that's it. That's just who I am. And I went home and I didn't cry and I didn't feel, because there was really nothing left to feel at that point. Mission accomplished. Kind of full circle with the whole rejection thing. I don't know what God saw in me. I don't know why he kept coming after me. I felt like a monster. But he did. And it is so crazy, and it makes me filled with such shame and remorse and regret. But in the 2 years later, in the middle of an abusive relationship, I got pregnant again. There's so much shame there. Why me? But there was something a little bit different. And I wish I could tell you what it was. But even though I hadn't told my parents yet, and even though I didn't tell the dad at that point in time, and even though my best friend at the time told me that I was absolutely throwing the rest of my life away, I decided that this time was different. And on September 20th, 2005, my first son was born. And exactly 6 months later, okay, maybe not exactly to the day, but 6 months later, on Easter of 2006, I went down to the front of a church, baby in hands, and I gave my life to Jesus. And I knew in that moment that he saw me. And somehow I knew that he had seen me all those other days. And I felt him so real that day. And I knew that he had saved me. And I knew that he had saved that little boy. Oh, golly. You tell your story over and over and you think like, oh, it'll get easier or less emotional. So, the interesting thing is that I gave my life to Jesus, and it was this moment that was intense. And then I'm just like, okay, I'm a Christian now. And I went through a horrible custody battle with my son's father. We were never married, but we went through the custody battle, and I met this amazing guy who we got married, and we had 2 more beautiful boys. And I'm like, okay, life is good, right? Like, hey, remember all those things that happened in the past? We don't need to worry about them. My husband and I, he was from the Norfolk area, so we got married up there, and we decided to live up there. And we moved to a town of, 330 some people, literally more cows in that town than people, honestly. And we had a cattle drive. They took the cows from one field to another field, like straight down our street. Once a year in February, there would be like this huge like cow in our yard as they're like leading them down. I really wanted them to leave one for, so we could have some fresh beef, but they never did. But anyway, so we moved to the small town, and Mike's family, who were all from that area, were like, okay, this girl's gonna freak out, because I was originally from like Philadelphia, then Omaha, and now like tiny town. They're like, she's gonna freak out, she's gonna hate it. But I loved it. And while I loved the idea of raising my boys in the country and the simplicity that everything brought, the real reason that I loved it so much was because I got to run again. I didn't have to deal with that messy past. I got to start over. And I'm thinking, awesome, God, I love how you did this. Like, I get a fresh start, I get this wonderful little family, and I can leave everything behind. Perfect. Couldn't have designed it better myself. Except you don't leave it all behind. It's just the denial, right? So we don't talk about those things. My husband would ask me all about my past, and he knew my whole story. I had told him. But when he asked me things, I'm like, no. We don't talk about it. I mean, he would bring it up and I would freeze, or I would get mad. Like, these are the things we do not talk about. That is the past. This is now. I am fine. I don't know how you found a girl that has so much stuff in her past, but doesn't have a lot of baggage, right? As long as we don't talk about it. But they're still there. And they still haunted me. Because I believed I was unworthy. I believed that there were things that were bad enough that you can do that God doesn't really forgive. And I also know, being somebody that now went to church, that there were things that you do not talk about. And abortion is like numero uno. You don't talk about those things. You don't bring them up. And that compounded all these feelings of, I will never be good enough. I am not worthy. And do you know what happens when you keep things in the dark? They keep a hold of you. And so everything that I did always had that shadow on it. So there was this weekend that my mother-in-law invited me to go to this women's night at, interestingly enough, the same church that I had given my life to Jesus at a few years earlier. And we were at this church service and they were worshiping. There was going to be worship and a comedian and then a message and then dessert. And I'm like, dessert? I am so there. Like, sign me up. So we were in the middle of worship. I don't even know. I think 2 songs, 3 songs in. And the song Ever Be came on. And in the pit of my soul, I felt like God was speaking to me and said, you are going to share your story. Now, this caught me so off guard. I am like looking around, like I knew it was an inner voice in me, but I'm just like looking for the person who like that message was for, because I'm like, oh God, first of all, no. I have not even, like I had never even said the words out loud besides like telling my husband, we're not talking about this. And I am certainly, I don't even know who you think that I'm going to tell this to. Like, so if you would just kindly put the name in my head of who you would like me to give this message to, I will deliver the message for you. I'm sorry you got the address wrong, but let's rectify the situation and we can all move on. But I knew it was for me. And I've just lost it. There were not enough tissues in the room to mop up the mess that was going on. And then that was it. That was all I got. That was the impression that I got. And then that was it. And I'm like, okay, let's just tiptoe out of this situation. Nothing's disturbed. But it was this beginning of this journey that God had me on. And the next move that came was the moment or the season that God let me know that I was not okay. You see, we were living up in that small town, and my husband started a business, and he said that in order to really thrive the business, we had to move to somewhere that had a bigger population, somewhere where we had roots, somewhere where there was a great church. Oh, weird. That somewhere is everywhere that my past was back in Omaha. To say that I threw a fit would be an understatement. Like I used everything in my power to keep us from moving back to Omaha. I cried, I screamed, I told him that he wasn't listening to God, that he was just going after money, that we wanted to raise our house in the country. I mean, like I went for the jugular because the idea of going back and facing my past, that I could turn a corner and run into somebody that I knew that knew me was way too, like I'm a runner. You don't run back to the problem, you run away from the problem. But God said, no, you're going back. And so I went back. And it wasn't, and here's a funny thing about this whole story. It is not like one thing on top of another. It wasn't like Wednesday I went to the church thing, Thursday, he said, nope, you're going back. And Friday, we're dealing with this. This is over years. This is this slow unpacking. And so we move back to Omaha. We start going to church, and they have this church service called Healing Rain. We had a friend that was really, really sick. And we have these Healing Rain services is where you go and there's worship and then people pray over those who are needing prayer, that are physically ill, mentally, emotionally, like whatever is bothering you. So at this point in time, my whole story, my whole testimony, the idea that God said, I'm going to share, that I'm going to share the story, not on my radar at all. Because when you're in denial, you get really good at it and then you stop thinking about it, like it's not at the forefront. So we go to this service and we are there for my friend. I am ready to pray my guts out for my friend to be healed. And in the middle, again, of a worship song, I wish I could tell you the name of it. I cannot. I get this vision. Now, I have had a really hard time calling it a vision because I believed that visions were only given to super spiritual people. But let me just explain how it happened. I'm worshiping and I close my eyes, and all of a sudden I am like looking, like my eyes are closed, but it's like they're open, but I'm in a completely different place. I'm in this field and there are thousands of wild flowers. And I'm looking around and you can almost feel the breeze on your face. And I can almost smell like the flowers, the sunflowers, the lilacs, like all of it, okay? And then I see them. There are 2 small children in this field. And I can see every detail. The color of their hair. There was a boy and a girl. And she had a little dress and a bucket where she was collecting flowers. And the boy was close to her, and my eyes popped open so fast and I was gasping for air. And I just knew it. I knew that this was my punishment. I knew that seeing them was a punishment for me. And I just couldn't handle it. And as I sat in that moment, I felt my eyes close again and I could see them again, and it hurt so bad. But then I felt like God said to the place that I needed to hear it the most. You see, it's okay. They're okay. They're perfect and they're here with me and they're okay. And you don't need to hold on to it anymore. And then I wanted to keep my eyes shut. I wanted to memorize every part of them. And I realized that it wasn't a punishment. It was a gift. It was the most beautiful gift. It was grace. It took me 2 days to tell my husband about it because I just wanted to sit with that memory, with that experience. Over the next 2 years, God and I walked through the healing process. And I got to a point where I'm like, I don't know, God. I don't know what this is all for. I don't know what to do with it all. And he showed me this one summer, a couple years after this experience. I was on vacation in Florida with my husband and his side of the family, and on the last day that we were there, it's my tradition, like whatever vacation we go on, the last day we were there, I always go to like watch the sunrise on that last morning. Get up early, go down to wherever. Now, this time we just so happened to be at the beach. So of course, like I'm gonna go down and watch the sunrise. So I'm down there, and the sun like starts coming up over the horizon, and there's these colors are just beautiful. And I mean, more vibrant than I had seen in a long time. There were these they were like bright pink and reds and yellows, and then there were oranges, and then the ocean below was like blues and greens and purples. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, like Jesus is gonna come out of the clouds right now. Luckily he did not, but it looked like the sky was on fire. And I started thinking about it, and I'm like, okay, look, I have seen a lot of sunrises. But I started thinking, like, what makes some sunrises like different than others? Like, what makes the colors come out? And God's walking me through this whole time, because I studied meteorology in college. So I'm a weather nerd. Like, I know these things. And he's like, all right, let's do this. Like, what makes these colors? And I'm like, well, okay, what's in the sky? Well, there's dust. There's dust in the sky. And like when the sun's coming up over the horizon, it hits these dust particles and, creates these colors. And I just think about like God made us of the dust of the earth. And so I'm like, all right. So what else is in there? And I'm like, well, there's water droplets. And I think about every tear that I've ever cried. And so then I'm like, okay, but like those things are in the atmosphere everywhere. So what else? And then it hit me. It's the pollution. The pollution can be the difference of like seeing lots of different colors or whatever. And I think, like, what is pollution? Like, it's the byproduct. Like, it's from these factories. It's from these places. It's like the messiness, like the bad stuff. And I think about the things in my life. I think about the mess. And I think about the yuck. I think about the regret and the shame and the bad decisions. And as I think about all this, I think about, wow, God, here we are. We've got the dust, and we've got the water, and we've got the pollution, like we've got the bad stuff. But when you let the light hit it, when that sun rises and the light hits those things, it's beautiful. And what I knew in that moment he was trying to tell me is that he can take a mess, and if we allow the light to hit it, it will be something beautiful. And it's more than just for our own eyes. People will see it. But we have to let the light hit it. We have to let the light touch all of it. So we can't keep running. We can't keep hiding. Look, I know that I could live a much easier life, not have to worry about what people think about me, if someone's gonna judge me, not like me because of my past. I wouldn't have to worry about that if I wasn't out sharing it. But if I didn't do that, who is gonna be the one telling the people that are still in the mess that there's hope? Look, if we can share our stories, if we let the light hit it, if we know that God designed these things for a purpose and know that there's beauty in them, even the worst of our worst, if we could shake off everything that holds us back and share our testimonies real and raw, if we could give that gift to others, I think that is the best way to honor him. That's the best way to glorify him. And that's the best way that we can live out no matter what we've been through. I really hope that that you got something out of this. My heart is to just share openly, because God saw me and he sees you too. Thank you so much for listening.